Greetings, Professor here. Recently, there have been so many accidents with airplanes around the world. Do you think it's an accident? Of course not. So I will reveal the secrets of the aircraft corporations, and we will understand the reason for the price of their greed. Is the moment of crash test of the plane noticed that it just flew apart, but he fell not even from that huge height at which usually fly planes, and so bend the wings of Airbus, a 350XWB, seems that they are made of plastic. How is this even possible? Well, get ready today. I will tell you the whole truth about the fragility of aircraft. On April 28, 1988, an Aloha Airlines plane took off from Hill to Honolulu at an altitude of 7,300 meters. A section of the plane's roof suddenly came off. An explosion occurred. Depressurization. One of the flight attendants died. She was simply thrown out of the plane. 8 more people were seriously injured. However, the plane managed to land. What was the cause of the breakdown? It is believed that the so-called metal fatigue is to blame. But problems can be caused not only by long-term operation, and the most common hail, cracked windshields, fairing damage, breakages inside the engine, and all this because of some ice balls. So, in 2017, the pilot of an Airbus A320 had to land a passenger plane blindly. Giant hailstones damaged the cabin windows and the autopilot. And this is just one example. All this makes me think that many people trust themselves every day in their lives and health. Are the planes themselves really so fragile? And is it not the attempt to make them lighter that is to blame? Of course, planes are very heavy machines in themselves, but compared to other vehicles of the same size, they are relatively light. The lighter the body, the easier it will be for the engine to lift it into the air. This is logical. However, creating an aircraft is always a compromise between low weight and high strength, not because designers think about how the plane will survive a fall. The aircraft must be strong and rigid enough to withstand the various forces acting on it during flight, over and over again, and there is no talk of resistance to the ground. After all, planes are designed to fly, not to fall. This may sound cruel, but if something goes wrong and the plane starts to fall, it will crash. In any case, no matter what the designers do, this cannot be avoided, so no one tries to strengthen the plane in this case of falls. In addition, if you compare planes with the same cars, there is a huge risk of one car colliding with another with obstacles near the road. In short, protection is simply necessary here, but the likelihood that one plane will collide with another is negligible. The main danger is the fall, and it is almost always fatal. Therefore, it makes much more sense to prevent. It is better to reduce the probability of a fall than to strengthen the plane in the hope that it will work. Statistics show that in the period from 2012 to 2016, the probability of dying in a commercial airliner crash was 1 in 3.37 billion. Especially conducting research to somehow make the plane stronger for the sake of such a tiny chance is simply unprofitable. Especially now, people are more concerned about how to make the plane lighter, more aerodynamic, and more wear-resistant. Special attention is paid to composite materials. They can reduce weight by 20%. However, such materials make the plane more vulnerable to lightning strikes. So there is something to think about here. But does this mean that lighter aircraft will become even more fragile? Because I remember the footage of that plane that was smashed by a simple hail, and I somehow feel uneasy. Well, maybe it is too early to draw conclusions. Processes to lighten aircraft were launched quite recently. Research is being conducted. Scientists think, and all that maybe a suitable material will still be created so that it is both light and durable. Maybe this will even happen in the near future. especially since mankind has already done something similar. The first aircraft were heavier than modern ones. For more than 60 years, they were made of aluminum. Until people figured out composite materials, they were first introduced in the design of military aircraft in the 1950s, 1960s. But as it usually happens from the military industry, everything gradually moved to civil aviation. The process is not fast because you need not just take and replace all the aluminum in the vessel with a composite material. It is important to find a balance, and aircraft designers are getting closer to their goal. For example, in the Boeing 777, which has been produced since 1993, composite was 12%. But in the Boeing 87 Dreamliner, which flies with 2019, composites are already about 50%. At the same time, in the Airbus A350, 53% of composites were introduced in 2015. And this is only the beginning. Don't think that humanity has only just realized that an airplane needs to be lightweight. After all, remember the Wright brothers. After several years of research and glider flights, the famous inventors eventually designed an airplane with an internal combustion engine. Its power was as much as 12 horsepower. 1903, just a second. That was the beginning. 274 kilos in length, 6.43 meters. In general, it did not fly far. It fell after 12 seconds because it was too heavy. But it is worth admitting that no matter how amazing composite materials are, they have their drawbacks. Yes, they are lightweight, but it is much more difficult to detect damage to a fuselage made of such materials than if it were made of metal. And this can be critically important. Remember the plane whose roof was torn off? One of the passengers later said that she noticed a crack in the fuselage when she was boarding, but she did not tell anyone about it. Could a crack have caused an air crash? In the case of composite materials, it may be simply impossible to find such damage without special equipment. This means that the risk of an incident will increase. In fact, today's airplanes are much safer than their predecessors. Just think about it. Initially, airplanes were generally made of wood and fabric logic. It is clear materials are light and accessible, but the higher people tried to fly, the more durable their ships had to become. So they generally became metal. To fly higher, it was necessary to develop a high speed, and wooden structures could simply fall apart. But in general, when people had just begun to seriously conquer the sky, few people thought about such a thing as safety. Of course, airplanes could fly, but if something went wrong, little could protect the pilot or passengers from imminent death. Over time, people realized that the seat in airplanes must withstand overloads and be securely fastened, so as not to break. Passengers who have their own margin of safety figured out other important things today. Fire-resistant materials in walls, seats, and carpets help slow down the fire. And when fires do occur, new materials do not emit toxic gases that were present in airplane seats several decades ago. Does this guarantee that modern planes are made lighter so that they somehow magically also become safer? This is something that is generally thought about, but it is clearly not the only thing. In general, creating lighter planes means more profit for airlines and cheaper air tickets. And when the question of profit arises, someone especially greedy is sure to get carried away. How do you like the idea of vertical seats? Some airlines have seriously tried or are still trying to push it. It is usually assumed that passengers should sit on a narrow shelf with all the load on their legs and their back pressed against the back of the seat, plus, of course, seat belts and armrests. Is it comfortable? It is definitely not. Besides, many people, due to their build or health, will not be able to spend the entire flight in this state. Yes, vertical seats would make planes more spacious without making them heavier, but I highly doubt that anyone would ever go for such a strange innovation. And yet, let's admit the obvious. Despite the fact that planes are being made inexpensive, no one forgets about passenger safety. So every aircraft undergoes rigorous testing before it is released into the sky. Precisely because of these tests, we know, for example, that the wings of many modern passenger aircraft can bend almost 90 degrees on a test stand. 90 degrees, airplane wings. Moreover, the final test includes breaking off the wings. Yes, it is expensive, but it helps to determine their strength limit and ensures that it far exceeds the predicted load level. In short, everything to be sure that the wings will definitely not break off in flight. The planes are also tested in conditions of extreme heat and frost, for example. To test the ability of the Airbus A350XWB to withstand low temperatures, engineers delivered it to Iqaluit, the capital of the Canadian Arctic territory of Nunavut. The plane remained there for a week, and the tests included operating the plane on the ground, in the air at temperatures down to minus 28 degrees Celsius. They were tested with snow and the plane coped. What other dangers are there? Lightning, for sure. Such stress tests also exist because on average, lightning strikes every commercial plane about once a year. Engineers even have a special generator that creates lightning in artificial conditions, and then they hit the plane in the right place. Do you know what's most interesting? These very flexible wings that look scary are an advantage. The wings are made of the same composite materials. That is, made of carbon-carbon, not only has a higher ratio, strength to weight ratio, than traditional aircraft metals, it is also more flexible. And the curvature of the wings improves aerodynamic stability, meaning the aircraft becomes more streamlined, experiences less drag. While in motion, this helps provide a smoother ride for passengers and minimizes turbulence. In short, the benefits should outweigh the scary impressions. After all, the engineers know what they are doing. And that's all. This is, of course, very interesting, but is it really impossible to come up with something so that people don't die when planes crash? Yes, ideas appear periodically that seem life-saving, for example, to build airliners with removable passenger cabins that could separate from the rest of the plane in an emergency and land safely. Cool after all. But this only works in theory. Firstly, this design would be very expensive. And secondly, even if such things were built, they would save the lives of a very small number of passengers. Why is it all about the nature of the breakdown? It is assumed that a removable passenger cabin will come in handy if the engine fails. But this is exactly what happens, very rarely. Over the past 10 years, such breakdowns have caused less than 3% of all fatal accidents. Everything is much worse during takeoff and landing. According to Boeing statistics, almost 3/4 of deaths in air crashes between 2005 and 2014 were found at these stages of flight. Will a removable passenger cabin help? Most likely not, except when the plane takes off or lands. It probably located near a populated area. Now imagine what the consequences will be if the cabin with passengers falls on some house. In general, the idea of a removable cabin is not bad, but in practice it simply will not work. But naturally, the most frequent and logical question is why passengers are simply not given parachutes. In the end, parachutes definitely save lives. This has already been proven so many times that there should be no doubt. However, commercial flights still do not do anything like this. It is too expensive. Well, not really. Experts say the process of putting on a parachute takes several minutes, so passengers would have to wear parachutes throughout the flight. Otherwise, they simply would not have time to prepare for the jump. If you have ever seen what a parachute looks like when folded, then you understand that spending several hours with such a blanket on your back is terribly uncomfortable, and flights can be hellish. Let's assume that The comfort of passengers can be neglected, but the jump itself requires from a person strong nerves, certain skills, and of course strength. You need to force yourself to jump from an airplane rushing at great speed into the airflow. Take a pose that will not get entangled in the opening parachute. Stay away from other passengers. Open the canopy in time. Do not crash into anyone on the way, and then land safely. Experts even cite statistics according to which the average man, woman, or child in a Boeing will have a better chance of surviving a plane crash than if they use a parachute. It is clear that this is only theoretical data, but we still have no other. See you soon.